The Hog Sty is brought to you by TicketClub.com, your one-stop shop for live events nationwide. Whether you're looking for game, theater, or live performance tickets, don't sweat it. TicketClub.com has you covered. So make sure you're going there for all your live entertainment needs, and make sure you're clicking over to them from the banner at the top of thehogsty.com.
It's Just Business with Steve Thomas and John Worrell. And now, here's your host, Chris Leary.
Hello and welcome to another episode of It's Just Business on the Hog Sty Network, the show where we look at the dollars and the cents of the sports industrial complex. I'm joined by my regular castmate Steve and our super sub Alex Zeese. How you doing today, gentlemen?
Doing just fine. It's a great weekend here. Got lots of good football coming up, so you can't ever go wrong with that. In spite of everything that's going on in the world, football, generally speaking, for me, makes everything better. So I'm happy about that.
And I just feel a little guilty that I'm only on here anytime one of you guys is in a hospital, it feels like.
Or some other bad thing happens. I mean,
yeah, nothing. It's never like, hey, someone's getting married or somebody's like, on an exotic vacation. It's always something bad.
Well, the truth of the matter is we really don't want you here, but we have no choice but to have you. That's
right.
That's really, to be bluntly honest, that's really what it is.
No, I get it.
But please stay and do a good job on the show anyway.
Yeah, that's that's quite the coach's motivational talk right there.
Nobody ever said I was Vince Lombardi.
No, I get it. I'm the Colt McCoy of this situation.
Yeah, you can step in, do a mediocre, average job.
And be hurt by the third story.
Right.
All right. Well,
that's what's going to happen.
With that to look forward to, we're going to jump right into it this week. It's going to be NFL heavy, but not NFL exclusive. But we're going to jump in with a kind of a weird NFL story with the continuing saga of Eric Reid and his P-tests. Steve, do you want to give us an update?
Yeah, this is interesting because it raises a whole bunch of issues. And just as background, Eric Reid is one of Colin Kaepernick's close friends. He supported Colin Kaepernick's causes and whatnot, and we've beat that to death on this show. That's not really where we're going with this, but it's relevant to Reid's argument. So what happened here is that a couple weeks ago, Reid complained to the media, like in the locker room after a Carolina game. I believe it was in the locker room, and said, I've been tested 7 times this season. It's crazy. It's way above everything else. It's way above the number of tests that other people have gotten, and they're just targeting me. For obvious reasons, because he still continues his Kaepernick protests. And he's also, by the way, suing the NFL in a case that's separate from Kaepernick's, but he's suing the NFL alleging collusion as well. So that is going on. And so what Reid Reid directly suggested that he's being targeted as a result of his claims against the NFL. So the NFL took issue with this, predictably, but what was very interesting is that the NFL and the NFLPA, a couple days later, issued a joint statement together that disputed what Reid was saying. And that's interesting because the NFL and the NFLPA can't agree on lunch, much less anything else. They are constantly at war. But for this, they came together. And so here's their statement here. They said, we take any claim questioning the integrity of our collectively bargained performance-enhancing drug policy seriously. We ask the independent administrative policy to review and produce a short report on the claims of targeting. A copy of this report, which contains personal and confidential testing information, has been provided to Eric Reid. We will not breach any player's confidentiality, but can confirm that the report documents the dates he was randomly selected for testing and the actual dates of the drug tests. The report also demonstrates that Mr. Reid's tests were randomly generated via computer algorithm and that his selection for testing was normal when compared with the number of tests players were randomly selected for throughout the league during the time he was on an active roster. There is no evidence of targeting or any other impropriety with respect to his selection for testing. Predictable that the NFL would say that. I thought it was very interesting that the NFL would say that, NFLPA would say that. So then the next thing that happens, the follow-on, and this is from the 10th of January. And my source, this is all over the place, but my source for this was KON.com, which is a Portland, Oregon news station, and this just happens to be where I found it. Eric Reid's lawyer has now disputed the NFL's response to Reid's claims. And the lawyer said, no, the statement's wrong. The report that they did was not independent, and Reid really has been tested, way too many times. And so Reid's lawyer has disputed the dispute. And what I need to back up and say that the NFL asked what they claim to be an independent source to evaluate Reid's drug testing under the drug testing program, and the report they were talking about in the statement was a report that this so-called independent investigator found. And so what Reid's lawyer is saying is, well, that report is just wrong, and theoretically has proof, but he hasn't produced it yet. So that's the story. Thoughts? I have tons of thoughts on this, but thoughts.
Well, the first thing that I noticed about the story is the big debate seems to be that the NFL is saying he wasn't tested as many times as he's saying he was tested.
Yeah, that's the nutshell of it, yes.
Which, it seems like this would be a pretty easy thing to sort out. And, I'm going to tend to say, all right, it's, 7 times he's claiming?
Reid claimed 7 times. The NFLPA statement said that that's wrong.
Right, but they haven't said a number, right?
No,
They're not
didn't.
saying, it was 3 times or something.
No, and they really can't. That's the thing. The drug testing program, all of it is confidential.
Right.
None of it's supposed to be releasable. What they are allowed to do, they being the NFL, they are allowed to publicly dispute facts that the players put out there that are what they claim is inaccurate. So that's the reason why this statement's out there. But what they can't do is just lay it all out and say, here's the dates that Reid's been tested, because that's a violation of his confidentiality. And there's probably some HIPAA stuff in there too, I would guess.
Yeah, I understand that, but it's from what I saw, his lawyers are saying, no, go ahead and say what dates you're claiming publicly.
They haven't done that yet.
I'm kind of waiting to see what the NFL's response is in that regard, because this is a pretty easy thing to say, here's the dates, that the NFL's saying 6 or 5 or whatever they're saying, because it's not like it's going to come out and be like, he was tested twice. There's no way they would do something like that, because it's pretty obvious on social media. You could just go back and see like the last 4 or 5 times that he's complained about it.
And Reid is not one that tweets a lot.
No.
And so there's not he's not one of these guys that says he's having a ham sandwich for lunch and the blah,
Right.
blah.
It wouldn't be hard to go and track his tweets and say, well, here's at least the last couple of them.
Right. In terms of my thoughts on this, the sort of the the direct allegation by Reid is that he's being targeted as a result of his political stances. I don't think the NFL isn't run by dummies. It may seem like that sometimes, but the NFL is not run by dummies. And from an attorney's perspective, I can't imagine a dumber thing to do than to manipulate a drug testing program to target someone who's suing you. I mean, the NFL would have to be incomprehensibly stupid to do that, because there's an active, ongoing lawsuit. I can't believe that that's happened. Now, I mean, if he really has been tested 7 times since he was signed by the Panthers on September 27th, that's a lot of times. I don't know much about. I don't have any experience with the NFL's drug testing program. In my NFL workings, that was not something I came across. But I have been subject to random mandatory drug testing for a long time, and there have been times when I've been hit many times in a row and wondered what the heck is going on here. Why am I targeted? Never that many times, but sometimes they come in bunches. The NFL apparently uses a computer algorithm that theoretically randomly selects people. That having been said, it certainly wouldn't be hard to manipulate it, if you wanted to. But I can't believe the NFL would be that stupid.
Right, really it wouldn't be hard to say, all right, randomly select the people whose name are Eric,
Well, I know, the federal government goes by Social Security number, and they have a big computer that selects Social Security numbers, and that's probably something similar. My point here is that why on earth would you hand somebody who's suing you evidence of wrongdoing? That's just crazy. So I don't think the NFL would do that for that reason.
Well, the only counter I'd say to that is, because they're kind of hush-hush about how this random selection process goes, there's no telling that there's not some lackey who really doesn't like what Eric Reid was saying and, targeted it.
Yeah, it wouldn't be hard, to manipulate a computer algorithm or just fake it and send the name. Certainly that could be done.
Right, and the person who's doing it could be ignorant as to, well, this is not a good idea because you're being sued.
Chris, you're sitting there scratching your chin like you have a whole lot to say.
I don't know. I mean, I think this whole thing is silly. Algorithms, it's like we have to both, whether it's that line of argument, Alex, that was just positing, or even Eric Reid's, it's like, it's one of those things where we have to zig and zag long way away from what is probably more obvious answers. Algorithms are weird. Have you ever listened to your music on random and think you keep getting the same artist over and over again and think that the algorithm is somehow conspiring against you to only hear the Who? No, this is, complicated math. There's always a math explanation for these things. So one, there could be that. Eric Reid is also not that bright. Even spouting off, even if you think you have a case, spouting off on something like this, which is easily proven on the league side, whether they have to announce or not, it's a different story. Then they have to prove it in a court of law. And for what Steve is saying, it would be. Why would NFL do this when it would only hurt their case? Also, Eric Reid. Listen, if you listen to the show for a while, generally what stance I have on this. But Eric Reid is not necessarily the best mouthpiece for these issues, considering, he had to I forgot who the player was, but getting in all these battles over who was a bigger SJW and all that. Like, he repeatedly steps in this and ends up being a bad spokesman for any of this. So this, to me, is just another piece of evidence of a guy who, quite frankly, wants to have his name out there in these issues, whether it be like, I'm being drug tested too much, or this other guy, isn't as SGW as I, or whatever. It's just like he's always on the periphery of these stories, and it's exhausting.
Yeah, I mean, look, Eric Reid, like you said, isn't exactly the sharpest knife in the drawer in any way, and it would not surprise me at all if he just kind of mouthed off and said, man, I've been tested 7 times and the answer's really like 3 or 4 or something.
Right.
I mean, that is equally possible with this. I think the larger issue that he's trying to allege is just, stranger things have happened and people have been dumber than this, okay? But the larger issue is that there's just no way anybody with a brain would advise the NFL to surreptitiously target someone, who's got a collusion case going. That's just craziness and crazy talk about it. But I have personally been subjected to this, not by the NFL, but by the federal government. I have been tested over and over and over again in a row to the point where I was wondering why I was being tested, and past all of them, of course. But it sometimes, like you said, just to be clear, I don't do that kind of thing, but just to be clear,
Steve, they were trying to give you a hint. That's what they were doing.
Maybe it was. I guess. But, the military would have thrown me out, and that wouldn't have been a good thing. But anyway, yeah, like Chris said, sometimes math is weird, and math comes up, and you just get hit a bunch of times. It happens,
Like, can you imagine being your commanding officer and get the reports? Why are we testing Steve again? Come on.
I looked into, this is why this made me look into what the system, how they were selecting it. Honestly, because I went around and I went to the person who does this and said, why am I keep getting hit over and over and over and over again? And he explained their process, which is no sense in going into it in this show, but it was just a random bad luck, and that's probably sometimes the simplest answer is the truth, and the truth probably is that Eric Reid got hit a bunch of times because the algorithm gods decided that he was going to get hit a bunch of times, and that's the end of it, and he's trying to make a huge deal out of nothing. The NFL felt like they had to respond because of who Eric Reid is, and let me tell you something. The tell-all will be if this stuff is presented somehow in conjunction with Eric Reid's collusion case, then we'll know that there's more to it. If the lawyer just makes a statement, he's already done that and it goes away, then it'll probably be over with. Because Reid himself is not responding to this. Now, it would also be easy for Reid to produce the little slips. If he has 7 slips that says go pee, he ought to have those. And then produce them. And
they're not little. It's just like printed out on a piece of paper.
Yeah, it's like a piece of paper. And so if he's been tested that many times, produce them, and then we'll see.
That again assumes that he keeps those pieces of paper, which
he's not the sharpest knife in the drawer.
Right, but 90% of us, it's like getting a grocery store receipt. You don't keep that. As soon as you leave the grocery store, you throw it out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
The biggest damning piece of evidence that this is just 24-hour news cycle stuff is that as Steve, as you said, that the NFLPA and the NFL league office are somehow in agreement on something. That's a pretty good indicator.
Yeah. Now, the one thing I'd like to throw in here, I've suggested on our Hogsty social media account that somebody needs to ask Eric Reid if he's in the drug program, because that would explain him getting drug tested a bunch of times, and maybe he's just dumb enough not to say something. Well, our buddy Silas Red, who is a bit of a friend of the show, who's been on our show before, chimed in response to my statement and said, no, if you're in the drug program, you're going to get tested twice a week. And so, Reid does not suggest that he's been tested that many times. And so that doesn't sound like that was the answer. My thought was that maybe he's in phase 1 of the program, which nobody would know about. And he's been tested a bunch of times, and that's why, and he's just not saying it.
And unfortunately, as much as we like Silas, that's why he's not in the NFL.
Yeah, Silas Red knows specifically because he's been in the drug program. He got kicked out of the NFL. We love Silas. He was very nice to us, but that's why he's not in the NFL. And so, according to Silas, at least, you get tested twice a week, and so that's not the reason. So there you go.
Silas Panama Red. All right, so I think we've I'm sure we will have many opportunities to talk about Eric Reid in the future when that collusion case gets, into court or into arbitration or has a solution or whatever is going to happen at the end of that long and winding road. So we will take a bit of an off-ramp from the NFL into America's original but past-dated pastime, and that is Major League Baseball. Boxing? Yeah, well, no, in the modern era.
Okay.
Not horse racing either. What a cold stove free agency season that Major League Baseball is having, actually, for the second year in a row, and really a 3-year trend, although 2 years ago wasn't as steep. And actually, this year, signings to money is slightly up from last year, but still way down looking over the last 7 to 9 years. And what's even more interesting about this year is you have two, what people consider top 15 free agents of the last decade in Manny Machado and Bryce Harper. So, this is not a talent issue necessarily, at all, in terms of the free agents available. But we are just not seeing a lot of movement in free agency now over multiple years. Lots of different theories and reasons, but all those things are maybe even data-backed conjecture, but people are trying to figure this out right now. And what does this mean for baseball in general, or is it probably just a mechanical thing about how they run their off-season? Thoughts?
Yeah, I do have thoughts on this. Number one, part of the reason why there hasn't been a lot of movement is that Bryce Harper and Manny Machado have not signed anywhere, and they're taking forever. And at this point, we're well beyond the normal window. Like last year, Darvish was the big pitcher on the market, and he didn't sign until almost spring training started.
Yeah, mid-February.
But he's about the latest you ever find. Most of the big stars will sign in mid-December at the latest. And now we're into mid-January here, and it still hasn't happened. So that's the main reason why the dominoes haven't fallen, because the MLB hot stove stuff, it is truly like, it's like Jenga. You pull one thing out and the whole thing collapses. You can't start the process until somebody decides where the top talent's going to go. The other thing, though, this is why I think it's a good topic for this show, is there's actually a payroll reason why this is happening. Back in the last MLB collective bargaining agreement a couple years ago, MLB, they didn't institute a salary cap like the NFL has or the NBA has, but what they did do is they instituted a luxury tax, okay? And so how the luxury tax works generally in essence is if you go over a certain line for the luxury tax, you pay a fine. And it's not that much by rich billionaire owner standpoint, it's not that much in the beginning. But as it goes by year after year, you're over the tax, it gets to be incredibly onerous, like almost like a 100% tax. It's not that much. I don't have the number right in front of me, but it's something like 75% tax if you hit like year 4. And so now teams like the Yankees and the Dodgers in particular are trying to limit their payroll to get under the onerous third and fourth year luxury tax payments. And so
the Dodgers shedded payroll this offseason
tons.
So far, haven't
Well,
they?
yeah, and the Dodgers in particular had a $300 million payroll at one point. It wasn't players on the field. They had a whole bunch of outstanding obligations. The guys hadn't been on the team forever. Manny Ramirez was still getting paid. They were paying $1 billion to Carl Crawford.
Were they doing that whole, hey, we'll pay you for 5 years and pay it out for 15 kind of thing?
Yes, that's what was going on. And so they've gotten rid of a lot of those, and the Dodgers just not signing players. And that's how they've done it. And the Yankees have did the same thing. The Yankees have been trying to get under the luxury tax. And so I think a lot of teams, you take the combination of waiting on Bryce Harper, plus they really are paying attention to salary in a way that they weren't before. Not every team, but a lot of teams are. So I think combination of those two things are why we're seeing so little on the hot stove.
To back up a few of your points, in 2017, the latest Mark Trumbo was the biggest free agent, sort of on the big list, and he didn't last past December 23rd. So in 2017, basically before Christmas, the kind of top 20, like the prize free agents were all off the board.
Yeah, and Mark Trumbo ain't no Manny Machado or Bryce Harper.
Right.
No. Let's also say that's not the strongest, market, free agent market there. Well, I think I agree that I think the salary cap or non-cap luxury taxes you're talking about, I think that has to do with it. We have to be honest. The whole sabermetricsing of baseball has a lot to do with this too, where it's all about production for value. And when it comes to guys like I like Harper, I want him back with the Nationals because I'm a Nationals fan and I think he's good for the franchise, big picture wise. But you're never going to get the value out of that contract because no player is worth $300 million or more. Like maybe the occasional pitcher's worth a big salary because, I think pitching wins championships really in the end more than hitting. But a Harper contract like that, he's still going to be a 30 home run kind of guy. He's not going for 50 every year. So, you're not going to get that value out of it.
Yeah, and the numbers that Harper's agent was kind of throwing out anonymously to the media, because it was coming from his agent, was 10 years, $400 million. Now,
they initially wanted $500 million. That was their initial thing they were going for.
Yeah, and the report from the Nationals... wasn't from the Nationals. The report was that the Nationals had offered him something in the range of $300 million. Originally a long time ago, and that was kind of the baseline. And Harper walked away from that. And now the reports are that the Nationals and Harper have been talking recently again. And supposedly we'll see what's going on.
Well, no one else is willing to go much higher than that. It turns out.
Yeah. No, I think your point about the sabermetrics is a good point. And I'll just give an example of my beloved Dodgers. The guy who's running the Dodgers now, his name's Andrew Friedman, who's a huge Saber nerd about it. And for that reason, the Dodgers just don't sign big name free agents. They haven't signed a single one. If you look at what in spite of their huge payroll, they've not signed any big name free agents.
A couple years ago they did when they got a couple of big pitchers.
Well, they bring those guys in at the trade deadline and let them go at the end of the year. They haven't signed in the hot stove season a big name free agent except for bringing their guys back. And even then, they're not signed. They've never signed a $100 million contract for anybody. Believe it or not, strangely enough. Yeah, they haven't. And the reason for that is that Friedman is a huge Saber nerd, and the Saber stuff would tell you that, like you said, bringing in a guy like Harper who has immense intangible value for your franchise. I think if you bring a guy like that in because he's such a huge name.
Yeah, I mean, my reasoning for why I think the Nats should do it's all because if you're trying to establish a fan base and the Nats are still a youngish team, having a guy like that and saying he played here his whole career, that's how you establish a franchise.
Yeah, whereas Andrew Friedman would say, forget that. The Saber computers tell me that we need to bring in some little, some no-name who's going to be more valuable. Yeah. I hate that, personally. I'd rather see my Dodgers sign Bryce Harper. It's not my money, that having been said, but I think that's a part of it. So I think it's a combination of Saber, the payroll luxury tax, and just the fact that Harper and Machado were wringing their hands about what team to go to.
We won't get too deep into DC centric stuff. But I would, if you want an interesting take, Boswell in the Post, I guess it's Saturday's edition online, obviously doesn't matter, had a really great column this morning that, kind of backs up what Alex was saying, that the chances of Harper returning are now much higher and probably closer to what the Nationals' original offer was than, what they were hoping for, and would flip the Nationals' offseason into actually pretty amazing, because they've actually been fairly active in, not at the big name level, but, they just signed Brian Dozier, and they've actually been doing...
They've signed a couple pitchers.
Yeah, they've done some good stuff. So if they add Harper, it makes their offseason skyrocket. But I have a couple other interesting money angles to this. Kind of scrolling to find my numbers, although it doesn't super matter. But one theory is that baseball is actually doing very well financially. They've had their TV deals, both regional and national, are up. They're kind of taking on more of that revenue sharing model, considering these media contracts. They just sold to Disney, which is interesting. Looking forward, some of their streaming rights for a bunch of money. And there's actually a theory that owners don't need to spend. They're making a ton of money. They're making money off of more kind of an NFL business model, honestly, with broadcast rights as the key driver of revenue. And so there isn't as much motivation to, sign guys, to make splashes, to get good quickly, because the owners are sitting there just cha-chinging off of media contracts. So that's actually one theory about why teams are sitting on their hands a little bit, because they have no financial motivation, even beyond the luxury tax issues. But then Jason Stark in The Athletic had a really interesting column. You might remember Jason Stark. He was a longtime ESPN baseball guy, kind of.
He's a baseball guy, yeah.
Another one of the million people that have jumped to The Athletic over the last basically 18 months. But he was saying it is actually a problem because baseball's gate attendance is actually down. It was by a significant marker. And he went back and really charted, going all the way back to Bonds to San Francisco, what those kind of moves meant in terms of gate receipts. And so he was actually arguing that a cold stove is actually bad for butts and seats, and that, the lack of free agents moving, buzz around players moving on new teams may actually be keeping your gate receipts down. Now, if they're getting their media money, then they don't care as much.
Now, I correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm almost positive that the MLB's gross revenue is greater than the NBA's now. I'm reasonably sure that is the case. I think they're all good points. I do. But I think more so than the other sports, perhaps. And football is sort of angling this way too now, the NFL. But hot stove used to be a huge part of the NBA's draw, not NBA, the MLB's draw.
Right.
It went on. Something fans really want. That's why the name hot stove became a thing, is because it was so exciting for baseball fans. And if it's kind of dragging on, I think that's bad for the league, because the league doesn't have a draft that anybody cares about. The draft's in June, I believe.
Right.
And
middle of the season.
Yeah, and they're just not.
Always struck me as odd.
Yeah, it really is odd, and there's just not. Part of it, Alex, is that it has to be after the high school baseball season. And that's
I understand why it's where it is. It's just always struck me as weird.
It didn't even used to be televised at all until a couple years ago, and so they're kind of dragging.
When they needed to put it on their own network, yeah.
Yeah, it's not even really. It's not a thing like the NFL draft is.
Or
no.
NBA or any of the others.
So they don't really have anything to attract fans in the off season except for hot stove, and now that's going away. I think it's bad for the league in that it doesn't drive interest in the off season. Looks like Chris is still looking on my revenue issue.
Yeah. It's good. You're going to look a little bit. I got some numbers I'll share. But it really is also super interesting in terms of, and this isn't necessarily a numbers thing as much as it's kind of a cultural thing. But the NBA even has really stolen the kind of hot stove mentality. I'd even argue from the NFL a little bit in terms of its buzz, its excitement, the who's going where, the kind of tabloid nature of it. I think they are the kind of winners of the hot stove concept right now in terms of owning your year when players aren't playing. In a very similar way to how baseball used to own that. But so in 2018, Major League Baseball's gross revenue was $10.3 billion. And that was basically the same as the year before. But this year, that number doesn't even include as the $2.6 billion sale of the streaming spinoff BAM Tech to Disney, which puts $50 million in each team's pocket directly. So, and I don't have the NBA one right in front of me, but it's all glass half full, half glass half empty. But some gross revenue numbers for Major League Baseball, the trend is, as I said, I mean they're making money.
Yeah, they're for sure, they're absolutely making money. There's no doubt about that.
But I think more than perception, even that they're struggling.
Yeah, and they don't have a sharing, like a communist, Karl Marx would be proud sharing system in the same way that the NFL does. But they are giving more and more money out to struggling teams that they haven't before. That's how the Miami Marlins were surviving. And that's why and that's why everybody was so mad at the prior ownership of the Marlins, is that they were putting crappy product on the field that nobody wanted to see, and the team was horrible. And
to be fair, isn't the current ownership still doing that? I mean, that's just what the Marlins are. The Marlins they always get a bad owner who doesn't want to pay anybody anything.
Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah, and their new owner, of course, is led by Derek Jeter, who's the public face of it, and he's gone from loved to hated, Right. But and I just use that as an example. My point is the Marlins were struggling, yet the ownership was still making money because he was just pocketing the socialistic, handout that MLB was doing. So I think all of this is combining to limit the hot stove and player movement stuff. Because I also think, if your agent wants $450 million or $500 million, teams are not just going to sign you up for that. That's a lot of money. And I just don't think that any team is going to be so excited to immediately hand that out without waiting and bargaining for you and, bargaining with you and all that. So.
And if you're a Nationals fan who wants to see Harper back with the team, this is all very positive movement.
Yeah, I think it is. The thing that I'm kind of wondering when I'm looking at what's going on with the MLB is at some point I feel like some players will get a team to kind of back this, and you'll just get like 5 big-name free agents to all agree to do like a 1-year deal in one market to build like that, hey, let's just go try and buy a championship this season together. Because baseball is one of those sports where it's not like you have to play together for 5 years and it makes a difference. You pretty much can plug and play anybody because positions are so independent.
Haven't the Boston Red Sox been trying to do that for years?
Well, I mean,
they did do it.
They've won a couple championships. So,
I mean, my point is, like in spite of the public perception, the Yankees teams of the early 2000s actually were more largely homegrown. Core of that group, that team was so good was Derek Jeter, Roger Clemens, who's the other pitcher, Andy Pettit, Manny. Thank you, Jorge Posada, and the closer whose name's escaping me.
Manny Rivera. No. God, I can't.
Mariano
Rivera. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's embarrassing. It took us a while to come up with a name like that.
I mean, I said Rivera like 3.
Yeah, you did. Yeah. But my point is, that team was actually homegrown. They brought in a couple pieces, but there are some franchises that just don't do that. Like the Red Sox. Other than Poppy, the Red Sox, they bring in, they just bought that whole team.
Yeah, basically every championship team is a bunch of free agents.
Yeah, except for Poppy, and he's the only one. But I think nowadays, with the advent of this luxury tax, that just isn't happening. I go back to my Dodgers. Like I said, the Dodgers haven't actually signed a player for a $200 million contract. They haven't. And that's just the way they operate. It doesn't make me happy. I don't really like it.
But that's what makes me think it would only be done for like a year or two if someone were ever to try it, because the luxury tax, like you said, expands every year. So it's just give everyone a 1-year deal and get it, and just make a run. I could see teams starting to do that if someone wanted to be daring. But we are talking about sports owners. They don't really have daring in them.
No, sports owners aren't daring. Billionaires aren't generally, Howard Hughes types that are crazy and outlandish. They're billionaires because they've been aggressive and ruthless, but at the same time they are conservative about stuff like that.
Just we'll go out on this, but interesting that we're talking about the Red Sox because Dave Dombrowski, who's the president of baseball operations for the Red Sox and one of the people that's really kind of went them from curse to I don't know how many freaking World Series at this point. But he's actually proposing a deadline, free agent deadline for winter dealings for Major League Baseball. Looking at and basically to try to cut off this things going into February, et cetera, et cetera. Although one piece I read about that was it was less so that to improve the to get players more money or to improve the system in as much so that executives could have guaranteed time off. But it's
also called leverage against the negotiations.
But so that's one solution out there is to just put deadlines on which is also a little bit stealing from the NFL, to be honest.
What kind of deadline is it, though? I mean, after this time, you can't sign another player until
that doesn't make sense in any sport where people get hurt.
Well, I think yes, it would. But you would say free agency is open from December 15th to February 1st. Then it closes until I don't know spring training starts or something. But there would be a literal cold hot stove deadline. It wouldn't carry into the season.
I don't see that working. I could see if you were to configure it somehow like I don't know, the luxury tax is less if you sign a guy from X date to X date.
Well, see, everybody understands this about the luxury tax, okay? Yeah. The reason there's a luxury tax is not to help small market teams. The reason there's a luxury tax is the same reason there's a salary cap in the NFL and in the NBA. It's because they want to save the owners from themselves. The owners want to have an excuse to not have to spend as much money on payroll. That is why every salary cap exists in every sport. It is not for any other reason.
No, I understand that. My deadline that would increase the cap or tax or whatever would do the same thing. It's really to make sure the owners actually don't just sit on their hands all off season.
Well, and I think you could use a deadline like this to where if you were a team, you could use it as to your own leverage and say, listen, player, if you want a paycheck, you got to sign now because I'm not paying an increased luxury tax for you. So if you want a paycheck, take it now and take the deal we're offering, as crappy as it is.
Right,
so,
something like that might work.
Yeah,
just throwing it off the top of my head.
Yeah.
They could use a Larry Bird exemption in Major League Baseball, too, I would imagine. Would help.
You could, yeah.
I thought they had one. Don't they or no?
No, it's just a flat-out luxury tax.
Oh, okay. I thought that there was a kind of
They're headed that direction. Just wait till the next collective bargaining agreement comes up. Baseball will have that. It would be my guess.
Homegrown guys are cheaper kind of thing?
Something like that, yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. All right, so that was good. So we gave more energy to the hot stove season than Major League Baseball at this point. So we'll move back into the National Football League. Dun, 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 dun. It is, of course, we record this on the Saturday of division round playoffs. And so we're going to do a little bit of a check-in on ratings. First, let's talk about, just quickly, and then we'll transition back into the NFL, but the national championship game for college basketball ratings were abysmal, and so kind of picking up a little bit.
You mean college football?
Yeah, college football. Sorry, picking up on our college football and playoffs conversation from our last episode. Steve, I'd be curious to see what you think about that trend and if it's connected to any of the things that you were talking about in our last show.
Well, I think the reason why the championship ratings are down is that you have Alabama-Clemson round 3, is it? Was it 3 or 4? I think people are tired of it, particularly tired of Alabama. And I'm biased, okay? And I realize that people who know me know I just am sick and tired of Nick Saban, Alabama. So I come at it from that perspective. But I think the public in general is a lot less excited about seeing Clemson, Alabama round 152, than they are seeing some new blood, and so I think people just didn't watch it for that reason. It's like the casual fan isn't going to watch a match that they've seen 3 other times or 2 other times. I think that is the single biggest driver as to why the ratings were down.
But I think what you talked about last show around the cynicism, around the cooked rigged game, which is essentially why you get your Clemson. It's part of the driver about why you get your Clemson Alabamas at that point. I think also has a chilling effect on fan interest in the sport.
Maybe, but I also think their average fan doesn't care as much as we do about that kind of thing. That's certainly why I didn't watch, because the whole thing kind of sickens me, like we talked about in the last show, for sure. But I also think your average, family who, is sitting around and, what do we watch on, I forget what day that was on. Was it on Monday night?
Starting at 9:45?
Yeah. Yeah.
Can we also, that really, if you're going to change anything to fix that, why is the game on a Monday night?
Because the NFL is on the weekends. That's why.
Find a time the NFL's not playing.
Such as what?
Sunday night, for starters. The NFL doesn't put a game at Sunday night.
Yeah, except the Sunday night was the Golden Globe Awards.
No one cares about that.
The networks give it 3 hours of primetime space every year, and it got better ratings. We don't care about it. I personally think it's dumb.
I watched
it. But a ton of people... Okay, there you go. See, a ton of people watch the Golden Globes for some bizarre reason. So they're not... My point is a network is not going to counter-program against the Golden Globes. And so in that case, college football didn't really have a time to put it on the weekend.
But it's always on Monday nights. I've just always found that
Well, so is the NCAA men's basketball championship, too.
Yeah.
It's just weird. Championships belong on a weekend.
Okay, I just think start them at an hour you might get kids.
Yeah.
Well, I think you could, at a bare minimum, put the basketball championship on Sunday night. There's no NFL to program against. You could do that. Why they don't, I don't know.
All right, so anyway, let's jump into the NFL. Just a good little amuse-bouche there in football ratings. Right. So the NFL has basically had a pretty good year in terms of their NFL ratings. They're up about 5% from last year. You're still talking about a downward trend if you look over a 5-year span even. But they're 5% up. They were up in every time slot, 1 o'clock, 4 o'clock, Thursday night, Sunday night, Monday night, etc. And they had a pretty fantastic rating, 10% jump in wild card rating weekend. So obviously there's an upward trend in ratings for the National Football League. But the VP of research at Fox Sports actually had some interesting tweets. A man named Michael Mulvihill, probably getting that wrong, where he actually is saying that reach for the NFL was down 3% this year. But the fans that watch are watching more football. He said the average fan watched one additional game this year than last year, which might not sound like a big uptick, but you're talking about giant aggregate numbers, and those kind of blips mean something. And watch 3 more minutes per game. So your average viewership, the same people are watching more of the game they're watching, and they're watching more games, but it's actually reaching fewer people. So some real mixed bag. I think, we've sliced and diced many times the reasons why, and when you're talking about data sets this large, there's never one driver. It's a myriad of factors.
Right.
So, but, I'm sure the NFL is backslapping each other about their ratings rebound, but I still think we're finding out what the new TV fan base is over these next couple of years, and this is a interesting twist to the story.
Well, first of all, I think they'd be butt slapping each other, not back slapping each other, because it's football. But
right.
But yeah, I've believed for a while now that the NFL has lost viewers and fans in terms of gross total numbers, and what you're saying is sort of backs up my thought. At the same time, we talked about this before the show, Chris. We had an exciting season. There were a bunch of really big highlight games. Mm-hmm. That Rams-Chiefs game, and there were others. And, offenses always win in terms of excitement and ratings for the casual fan. And, we had the Saints were scoring 40 points a week, it seemed like. The Chiefs were doing the same thing. The Rams, for at least part of the season, were doing the same thing. So there was a lot of excitement there. And so it's not surprising me that the people who are watching the NFL are watching a little bit more of it just because it was a pretty good season in that regard. But I still think that the NFL's reach has narrowed a little bit for all the reasons we've discussed in other shows. And just parenthetically, anecdotally in my life, a lot fewer people are watching the NFL that I know than were before. So, and I think at least that doesn't mean anything to statistics at large, but that's just the belief I get from the people I know. So
I don't disagree that I think there's a certain segment that's just kind of stopped watching, but I think you can't underestimate the fact that in the last year or two, you've got a bunch of new teams that have come out and are kind of really taking over the league. And the league got stale with the Patriots for being the dynasty for so long that no one really even competed with. There was probably a good 10-year chunk where you basically had like the Patriots in every Super Bowl. That gets boring. It's just like you were talking about with college. If the same team, everyone wants a dynasty, but they don't want a dynasty to last that long. Like
they want a dynasty,
you want that
to
dynasty
build.
to be like 3 years.
They want a dynasty to build, and they don't really want it to stick around.
Right. They want to see it for 3 seasons, maybe 4, and then somebody else should come along and topple them. And you had a league where no one was toppling the dynasty, and they still haven't. But now you at least have, I'd say, 6 or 7 really fun teams to watch, and that helps. If you're not gonna, no one's gonna turn on the Jets Bills, right? No one's gonna turn on. I hate to say it, most Redskins games. Yeah. No one wants to watch the bad teams, but if you have at least 5 or 6 really fun games every week, the odds of people sticking around for a second game are better.
And incidentally, by the time this show is released, we may know if the Patriots dynasty is over or not.
That's true. Well,
if the Chargers go in, and because by the time you guys are listening to this, Chargers Patriots is over. So we'll know.
Right. Well, unless, and this is forward hypothetical, unless Tom Brady and Bill Belichick announce their retirement after they lose a game,
It's actually great for the NFL. It was actually a real win for the NFL to see the Eagles win the Super Bowl, because I think it helped to spur that narrative forward. It meant more, and the Eagles, listen, they were not a, preseason favorite or anything like that. So it showed that a team could hit a roll, could make smart moves fast and be in a big game and win the Super Bowl. So I think that helped to uncork that a little bit. Also, there's a factor here that I think is super interesting just from the interest in the league, even if it is by, a core fans or, a set who's watching more. I mean, ultimately, that still means viewers, is that we live in an era in the NFL. It's really unique. You've still got your generational quarterbacks that are all pushing 40, your Brady's, your Breezes, your Phillip Rivers, that are still, the Aaron Rodgers, they're still driving the league, still playing at an incredibly high level. And then you've got a whole cohorts of young quarterbacks who are coming in, playing well, and making a name for themselves, whether it's your Watson, Mayfield.
Sure.
So we live in, quarterbacks drive the league, and we live in this really interesting time where we have this amazing cohort of veterans playing at a high level and this amazing cohort of young quarterbacks playing fast and, for the most part, pretty well.
Well, I've said for a long time that when it comes to quarterbacks, by no means has the league got more quarterbacks than it has teams, but we might be more quarterback rich now than the league's ever been in any of our lifetime.
Except for the Redskins, who have a whole bunch of quarterbacks, and none of them can actually play the position.
But there's at least 20-something decent starters in the NFL nowadays, and there are eras, you go back to the 90s, there were maybe 3.
Yeah, look, I mean, the young guys that right now that are out there are a marketing dream. Marketing dream. You've got, Jared Goff, who looks like he fell out of the quarterback factory, basically. You've got Patrick Mahomes, who is a minority, number one, which is always good in terms of marketing, who plays fast. He's athletic.
He just can't do voiceover work.
He's got a rocket arm, which people like to see. The dude's a marketing dream. Russell Wilson is still fairly young. He's another one who plays an exciting up-tempo game, and again, let's face it, he's a minority. That helps. So there is a series of young guys, out there who are going to be the next generation, because Tom Brady is not going to last forever.
Brady, Manning, and Rivers, and even Breeze, you could easily see any of them retiring at the end of this season.
I think all of them are going to be gone in the next 3 years.
Yeah, but still,
in my opinion.
They're the reason, but there's still a reason to tune in today, right? Just, so.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a transition period, I think is what you're saying. And the transition is such that we have a whole bunch of players playing well. Both the old guard and the new guard are all sort of doing well. And unless you're the Washington Redskins, every team seems to have one, And if you're the Eagles, you have two of them, which is just so unfair and makes me hate myself.
Yeah, right.
And I just also like to say, because Alex knows this, but I have to get it in every chance I get, the horrible people of Philadelphia are so unworthy of having a team that's good. And I curse and a pox on all of you heathens.
We brought up one thing here that's kind of it's in, playoff weekend. And Steve, you're right, by the time this airs, we'll kind of know. But a kind of interesting story that we won't really be able to cover, so we're kind of preview, is if the Chargers beat the Patriots, there are rumors that the NFL does not want to play the AFC Championship game in whatever the heck that stadium experiences for the
soccer
stadium.
Chargers.
Yeah. So that's going to be a really interesting thing to
stadium.
watch if the Chargers win this weekend.
I have the answer to that. That soccer stadium is owned by a company called AEG, which is Ann Schultz Entertainment Group, which also develops LA Live, which is where the Staples Center is. There is a contract between the Chargers and the AEG that says the Chargers will period dot the end play every one of their home games in that stadium. And so the only way the NFL could move the AFC Championship game from the soccer stadium is if AEG decides to relinquish its rights, which apparently they have already said no to. So, and also the only way that the Chargers could host the AFC Championship game is if the Colts beat the Chiefs, by the way. So, because they're the 6th seed. So that just isn't going to happen, and the NFL is going to be stuck with it.
But no, it's viable that the Colts could beat the Chiefs.
But it's just not going to happen. AEG is not, apparently has already said no to that. So I think the NFL is going to have to look forward to a 20,000 seat, stadium to host the AFC Championship game if that happens.
That's great information, Steven. So I want to ask you this one last question on that. So let's say, Chargers win, Colts win, decent chance that those things happen.
The scenario happens.
Right. Is there then a dollar amount that AEG, is it a hard no? Or is it you haven't offered enough no?
My understanding is from what I have read in the sports media literature is it is a hard no. That having been said, hard no's can turn into yeses. If you offer enough money, almost everything has a price. And so, how desperate would the NFL be? I don't think the NFL would be that desperate over it, because what are they really gaining? Would they ideally they'd want a bigger audience, right? And ideally they'd want to be able to hand out more corporate freebies,
right?
But it's not the end of the world, if they don't, because the TV money is going to be there. So I think they would want it, but I don't think they're going to go overboard to get it.
Well, and the other factor is then you're kind of limited on where you're going to put it anyway.
No, they could go right over across the street to LA Coliseum.
Right, but when it comes to corporate freebies, it's not like that's got a bunch of luxury boxes.
Yeah, but there's a whole lot more
tickets. A bunch of bleachers, man.
I know, but they could go to the Rose Bowl. There's other venues in LA. Those two venues in LA that would be a lot more attractive. It would be easy, but my understanding is that it's a hard no. But again, like Chris points out, money talks. It's just a matter of how much money the NFL would want to bribe AEG with, and if it were me, it wouldn't be worth it.
No,
just for the AFC. It'd be worth it for a Super Bowl, not for a conference championship.
What the NFL should have realized is that the second the Chargers said, we want to go play in this stadium, they should have just said no.
And people also understand, by the way, that this is – I know you guys know this, but the Chargers aren't only there until the Rams stadium gets built, because the Chargers and the Chargers are going to be tenants in the stadium that is owned by Stan Kroenke, who owns the Rams. And so that's going to take
way to make yourself second banana right away.
The whole thing is
you're right. The NFL should have said no to the soccer stadium. And again, go get a lease with the Rose Bowl, for God's sake.
Get a lease with the Rose Bowl, or go get your own damn city. Like moving to LA was kind of a mistake also.
And I don't think they would throw a boatload of cash AEG's way, simply because, it's not going to be great. No. It's not their preference, but TV is still king, and they're still going to have Andrew Luck versus Phillip Rivers. It's not it's not a washout for TV at all.
Well, that's my point, is that, they're going to get the bulk of the benefit of it. They're going to lose out on some gate revenue, fine. So there's a break point, and I don't think it's very high for this. I think at the end of the day, the NFL just live with it.
Yeah.
All right. So we will, you'll see here in a matter of 24 hours how this all shakes out from the time we record this.
Well, everyone will know before they say
Yeah.
it.
Yeah,
We're talking about something like that.
that's already happened.
Yeah, we're talking
Yeah.
future tense, and if we talk about it in 2 weeks, we'll be talking in past tense. That's just how it works in the
Right.
podcasting game, people. All right, so I think that brings us to the close of another episode of It's Just Business. Super sub Alex Zeese, where can people find you?
They can find me in Washington, D.C. Twitter, Alex35332. Yeah, that's it.
All right, and Steve, we know that you're a man of mystery, but you do backseat drive the Hogsty account, correct?
Yes, you can find me there. Generally speaking, please don't try and track me down otherwise, because I don't really care enough to have you know me. Unless
you're a supermodel.
Then I'll. If you're a supermodel, DM me, honey.
Okay. You can find me at ChrisLarry33, and maybe I'll put a goal to myself. We do plan on having a It's Just Business Twitter account launched. Let's say we have it to announce on the next episode, even if it hasn't gotten off the ground that much. But we will share that at that time. Hopefully at the next show, if not in the next few shows. So there's a little sneak peek.
A good goal. I like it.
All right. Enjoy Division Weekend, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.